Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. For those of you who are all into business, about personal and relationships, I've got Morag Barrett. She's calling in to us from New Orleans, and she is going to talk to us all about the importance of relationships and networking in professional development, career networking. And we're going to talk about toxic bosses, colleagues, great resignation, great retention. And I'm really happy to have her on and pick her brain. Morag, welcome.
That sounds like a lot, though, for 30 minutes. We're going to get through it, though. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Briefly chronicle your journey and we'll dive into the questions.
Okay, I will be quick. Aspiring engineer, ended up going into finance for 15 years. So know my way around a balance sheet, cash flow forecast, business plan, but recognize that having a great idea, a widget, service, or a product is only half of the equation. In order to be successful in business or in life, what I've come to realize is it all comes down to the depth and quality of our relationships. And so that's what caused me to pivot from numbers to the human side of what makes and breaks careers, teams, and organizations every single day, which is what we're here to talk about now.
Wow, interesting. We'll talk about what's interesting is you did a research painting a troubling picture. You say we have toxic bosses, 67% of leaders, success undermined by a colleague, and 20% no friends or allies. When clients come to you, it sounds like they have a lot of pain points or frustrations, or are they actually aspiring or trying to achieve something?
Oh, so I think a little bit of both, for sure. We're all trying to aspire to achieve something. Otherwise, we wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. And I think that is often where the misunderstanding around the label of toxic bosses comes into play. Because I have yet to meet anybody who gets up in the morning thinking about, what do I want to achieve? I want to be seen as that toxic boss. Now, I'll accept there's a very small percentage, micro percentage of people who just can't help themselves. But for the rest of us, and I know I've been a bad boss at times, especially early in my career, but that bad boss was not intentional. It was a difference of styles or misaligned expectations. It was all about how we worked together. And the missing element was either you didn't have the courage or the ability to ask for different from me. So I wasn't getting the feedback. And I, as the boss, wasn't creating an environment where we were able to have that conversation. So my mission, why do I get up in the morning? It is to help to create those cultures of connection in a world that feels increasingly disconnected. And if I can help reduce the friction, I've now had the opportunity to work with 20,000 leaders from around the world, 6 continents, all of whom are trying to achieve great things in their career and in the world, but are finding that the friction and the interpersonal skills is what's slowing them down. And so helping to break down those barriers through our executive coaching, our team building work, and our leadership programs is doing that one conversation and one relationship at a time.
And interesting. And we certainly live in interesting times. And what I find fascinating is you're doing this work in this area, and a lot of people now are remote workers, or now a lot of people are solopreneurs, or people refuse to work for bosses and corporations and entities that don't align with them. So they're starting their own companies. So if somebody were listening to this, obviously you're in this kind of corporate, you help this area, but how can you translate your skill sets and your mindsets and mentality into somebody that's a solopreneur, entrepreneur, does their own thing?
So, well, I've been there. I was the solopreneur 18 years ago when I launched Sky Team. And I remember those early days. And I remember the conversations with my husband at the time that we would give it a year and see what happened. And having gone from a corporate career in an organization with thousands of employees to now just me, myself, and I, that feeling of loneliness and disconnection can actually catch you unawares. But here's the unexpected surprise. Even as a solopreneur, your success, my success, was still dependent on the quality of the relationships that I was either maintaining from my corporate career, because those alumni became some of my early clients, but the relationships that I also nurtured with sister companies that were either in similar or different businesses that could help me to succeed and for whom we could refer and make introductions. So the fact that we may be working in a smaller organization or a bigger organization, the irony is that feeling of belonging and that feeling of connection, or more importantly, the feeling of disconnection, can still exist. And so when we want to build that connection, it starts with each of us. So as a solopreneur, the way I got my people fix was threefold. Firstly, it was choosing to go and work in a coffee shop just because you've got the noise and the hubbub of people around you versus just in my home office. Second was actively leaning in to those communities, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, the professional associations, that allowed me to again.
Yeah, a little bit of technical difficulties with the internet, but yeah, talk about what's interesting is that you were talking about this connection, and when you were talking about coffee shop in today's hybrid world, how do we create genuine connections when we're not sharing the same physical space?
So I will admit, prior to the pandemic, I was a real skeptic on whether or not relationships could be built virtually. And it's ironic because I also remember as a child having a pen pal in Australia with whom I had a relationship all by snail mail. And at least now, when we think about the modern day, you and I, here we are connecting, and when the internet is not messing with us, we can see each other, we can hear each other in real time. And what I've learned since is that it is a mental shift. But some of my newest and deepest friends I have made through Zoom, some I haven't even met in 3 dimensions, all because we chose to lean into the conversations. We chose to make the space for the small talk, to tell our stories, to share a little bit of our life journeys that get us to understand who we are and how we relate before just jumping into what we do and how we organize the project or the work. So how do we build connection when we're working across time and distance? We do it by just slowing down and putting in the intentional pauses and the opportunities to connect that used to happen serendipitously in the workplace, whether that's in the break room, going for a happy hour, or bumping into somebody at the station and riding the train home together.
Interesting. And then the pandemic changed how we work, but did it change how we connect? What are you seeing in organizations now?
So actually, we're seeing that the sense of loneliness and disconnection is increasing. And think about it, when we're feeling disengaged, when we are feeling disconnected from our colleagues, the last thing that we want to do is probably fill in an employee engagement survey or a questionnaire about loneliness. So my belief is that it's actually underreporting. All the statistics that we are seeing through our own research and that are presented by others are likely to be underreporting the issue. The other challenge that we have is that, and I've done this, we can all fake perky our way through a Zoom call for 30 minutes and, yay, this is great. Hit that red button and then just go, oh my goodness, this is awful. And you may never know. And so what we need to be doing, as I said earlier, is making those opportunities to check in on how we're doing, not just what we're doing. And from our own research, you've already shared some of those statistics earlier on. 20% of leaders who've responded to our ally mindset profile tell us that they have no friends at work, not even one person who has their back or who they can turn to in times of uncertainty. And think about that for a moment. Even on a good day, maybe that's tolerable, but what happens when your project isn't quite moving ahead as planned? What happens if you find yourself suddenly on the job market? Who's going to help you land that next role? And when you couple that with the 67% of folks who say that their success has been undermined by the words or actions of a colleague, and through a McKinsey research where 75% of the employees responding to one of their surveys said that interacting with their boss was the most stressful part of their day. So think about that, 75%. That means all of us at some point are either the stressee or the stressor. And how do we turn that around? By being intentional about how am I showing up in this conversation? How am I feeling? Am I feeling like I'm firing on all cylinders, happy and energized? Or am I feeling drained and down? And can I share that with you so that you can understand and adjust accordingly? And am I also not thinking just about how am I feeling? Am I conscious about how do I want you to feel? How do I want the listeners and the viewers of this podcast to feel? Because both of those questions then inform, how do I need to show up in this moment? Where do I need to turn the dial up or down to ensure a successful outcome for both of us so that we can both achieve our goals and ultimately be better together?
Yeah. So we talked about very important when coming to nurture their professional relationships, and what are the most common mistakes people make when it comes to building this team and framework around them?
So the common mistake is that they just let it happen. There is no thought or process behind it. And when I ask leaders, if I come and join you on your team, maybe you hire me to either be a consultant or you hired me to come in and work for you, how long would it take for you to trust me? And leaders will say, 2 years. You do your job, you prove that you are trustworthy, and then I will trust you. No company that I work with, no team that I work with has the luxury of 2 years of grace. And if you think about a team of 10 people, if somebody changes now and somebody else joins in 6 months, you're always in that startup phase. You're never going to get to a high trust basis that results in a high performing team. So instead, we should be sitting down and having a conversation that understands, when are you at your best? What work really frustrates you? How do I provide feedback? What can I do to remove some of the barriers that might be getting in the way of success? And making that a two-way conversation, because that allows us to understand what makes each other tick, what might cause us to have an off day, and therefore give the benefit of the doubt, because if I have an off day today, chances are you'll have one next week. But that's where we start to get to, I have somebody who understands me. I have somebody who cares about me as a human being. I have somebody who has my back at work. And that's when we start to see innovation, creativity, informed risk-taking all start to increase, which just means that we are more efficient and able to bring our product, service, or widget to the market so much quicker and so much more efficiently.
And you came up with this ally mindset. What makes it different from just being nice at work?
So first of all, being nice is different to being kind. And I talk about that in our book, You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One, which I actually wrote with my two best friends at work, Eric Spencer and Ruby Vesely. So let me just start with what's the difference between nice and kind. So nice is telling people what they want to hear. Oh, Morag, you sounded fine on that podcast. Kind is, oh no, you spoke too long. You interrupted. You give me the feedback I need to hear, even if it stings a little bit, to help me to be better. And with the ally mindset, with the research that Eric, Ruby, and I have done with thousands of leaders now from around the world, we have identified 5 practices that help us ensure that we are a friend at work, so that those 20% of leaders that say they don't have a friend at work, we can start to shift that. but not only a friend to work at work to others, but a friend at work to ourselves by setting guardrails. So we're not just saying yes to keep everybody else happy. We're making sure that we're meeting our own needs too. And I invite all of your listeners to take advantage of the Ally Mindset Profile. You can complete your own free profile and receive a full report and help us to continue our research. And you do that at SkyeTeam, SKYE, team.cloud/you, me, we. But the 5 practices starts with abundance and generosity. And that means we need to start looking at success as not a finite resource, but an infinite resource. Because when we do, we can start looking and caring about others' success as much as we do our own. And if I'm looking out for you and how can I help you to be successful, then that moves to the second practice of connection and compassion. Because now I need to understand what it is that you might need from me, who you are, what experience and skills you bring to the table, where you may be fearful or hesitant to take action, and what can I do to build your confidence and your capability. And once we have connection and compassion, we get to courage and vulnerability. That's where empowerment happens, where you start to take ownership for your work. You take that informed risk, and then that leads to candor and debate that allows us to have those kind feedback conversations, to talk about the issues that may get in the way of success before they undermine us. And then that leads to the 5th practice, which is action and accountability. Because all of this is easy to talk about. The challenge is, and the action and accountability is, we need to follow through and be intentional and make choices about how we show up every day, how we prioritize the work, how and what words we use. It all matters. And when you can pay attention to those 5 practices, that's when we start to build a reputation of being the go-to colleague versus the toxic boss or the go-from colleague.
And then what's really, I think, what's interesting is this adjective of nice is quite often derogatory. It's used, but how can someone figure out their personal ally mindset, and what can they do to strengthen their professional reputation?
So first we'll take the Ally Mindset Profile. And as I said, skyeteam.cloud/you, me, we, and get your hands on a copy of both my books, Cultivate the Power of Winning Relationships and You, Me, We, Why We All Need a Friend at Work and How to Show Up as One. Now, what that will do is it will give you the inside out perspective. It will help you to understand, are you aligned with your own intent of what sort of reputation are you trying to build? But the best way to find out and to be that ally at work is you've got to ask and do it with others. Leadership is a contact sport. So once you've defined what does it mean to be a friend at work, to be a great leader, to be an ally, however you want to define it, ask your colleagues, what 3 words describe me at my best? What 3 words might you use to describe me when I'm not at my best? And see how that aligns with your intent. So if look up is, here are the 3 words I hope people use to describe me. Show up is then asking for that feedback and seeing what the impact is that you're currently having. And then the 3rd step in our model is step up. You now have a choice. How do you close any potential gap between how you want to be perceived and how others are experiencing you? And that's how you create a leadership reputation that goes ahead of you, that sets you up for success, not just for today, but for your future career aspirations, that next step on the leadership ladder that you might aspire to.
Yeah, fascinating. How can people connect with you and reach out to you and learn more from you?
You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. So Morag, M-O-R-A-G, Barrett, B-A-R-R-E-T-T. I respond to all the messages that I receive. So say that you heard me and heard us on this podcast. And you can follow me at skyeteam.com, S-K-Y-E team.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on and really fascinating conversation.